Tuesday. Welcome back to Post Sports Live. I'm your host, Jonathan Forsythe, and joining me in the Post TV studios are both DC Sports blog writers, Scott Allen and Dan Steinberg, and Brandon Parker. Welcome back, gentlemen. Happy Tuesday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good. You guys doing all right?
Yeah.
Doing great.
Excellent. Lots to talk about today. We've got one last preseason game. We're almost to the regular season of the NFL. Obviously, lots to talk about in the Redskins. This will be a Redskins-centric show. Going to get your guys' feeling on how worried or concerned you guys are, and the fan base should be, given the offense's struggles through the first three games for the Redskins. We'll get your thoughts on what one thing, if you had to attribute it to one for RG3 and his struggles, what do you attribute it most to through the first three games? And, of course, we'll get to the Kirk Cousins situation and wonder what his trade value. I feel like this is like deja vu all over again. But, you know, whether or not the Rams would be interested in him, and if so, if you're Bruce Allen, would you be willing to part with a backup quarterback for maybe a second or third round pick? And then finally, I'll get you guys' thoughts on whether or not the offensive starter should be playing in this final preseason tune-up in Tampa on Thursday night. Also going to talk about Nationals, guys, winners of 12 out of the last 14. And the question, and this comes off of a Thomas Boswell column that ran earlier this week, but if you had to choose who your game one starter would it be Steven Strasburg? And if not, why not? So we'll ask you guys that question. And finally, this Saturday is the first college football Saturday of the year, and we'll get your thoughts on Maryland's upside. What's their best case scenario for the first season in the Big Ten? All right, guys. Steinberg, I'm going to start with you. On a scale of 1 to 10, give me your number of your level of concern with the Redskins' offense through three games in the preseason.
I was hoping I would go later because I could shock you guys with my number. I'm at like a 2, honestly.
Wow.
I'm really low, and Scott and I have been talking about this a little bit. I think one of the big things people talk about is, the first-team offense never got in the end zone.
Yep.
I mean, if you think about it, Alfred Morris was ruled down at the 1-inch line against Cleveland. He gets in the end zone there, and that whole storyline is totally gone. And that has nothing to do with Robert Griffin III. That has nothing to do with play calling. That has to do with an extreme judgment call made by officials where the ball was an inch away from the goal line. So I don't worry about that much. Remember, the first preseason game, Deshaun Jackson, Pierre Garçon didn't play at all.
Right.
Obviously, they weren't doing a lot of what we expect the actual offense is going to be in terms of the bootlegging, getting RG3 out of the pocket, throwing on the run a little bit more. I mean, he hasn't looked great, but he hasn't looked very good. But he also had that nice long pass to Jordan Reed that was called back because of holding on Trent Williams. I mean, I think that we're extremely overanalyzing what was in total less than a game by the first-team offense against two pretty good defenses, with the team not even running the real first-team offensive plays. I don't think it's a big deal at all. I mean, I don't think it's a big deal at all, and I think last year we thought it was a big deal when they went 4-0 in the preseason.
Right.
Obviously it wasn't, so I would not worry yet.
So you're way low on the scale. What about you, Brandon?
I'm a little more concerned. I say like a 6 or so.
6, okay.
Because you pointed out the Alfred Morris thing, but he didn't score. That's the
the bottom line,
yeah,
right?
so, I mean, and again, 1 inch, like you said, 1 yard, 1 inch, big difference. But I don't know. I feel like, and we'll talk about RG3 some I know more later, but just the timing I think is going to be important because you've got all these new faces with Deshaun Jackson and Garçon getting used to playing alongside him, and some of the running backs getting their rotation. So it's just a lot of different factors that, yes, it's just preseason. Everything's not going to be, churning and running as it should when you're only playing little spot time here and there. But the defense isn't built. This isn't the Ravens' defense. They're not built to carry this team. So you need some type of production from the guy RG3 and everybody around him. So I'm about a 6. Maybe a little bit more, actually.
And you guys will have a chance to expand on these answers as we go and talk more specifically about RG3. But what's your level? Are you more 6 or are you more 2, Scott, or somewhere in between?
I'm going to split the difference exactly and say 4.
All right.
I'm really, like Dan said, we talked about it. I'm not all that worried. We're talking preseason here. The most concerning thing for me, more than the lack of offense production, is RG3 running out of the pocket and taking hits. I mean, that Cleveland game, besides the Alfred Morris being ruled down at the inch line, he had a fumble at the 50. The Redskins totally dominated that first quarter yardage-wise. And if you look at the stats, which is a silly thing to do in the preseason, they're kind of middle of the pack.
We're talking about the preseason right now, so
Last year the Redskins were 4th in the preseason in points per game. The Packers were last, and I think we know how that turned out. So.
Yeah, so I mean, basically the overriding, what I'm feeling from you guys, or at least the two on the ends, the bloggers here, is the don't overreact here. It's still early. And
Right, it's still
preseason. You can't
I
read
know
too
that.
much into it.
Right.
But given the fact, I mean, there are some warning signs given the fact that it's a new offense, new head coach, trying to force possibly a square peg into a round hole. Let me move to the RG3 minutes segment here, guys, and Dan, I'll come back to you. And to ask you, what one thing do you attribute? We talked about the offense as a whole there, the first, but let's focus specifically on the quarterback number 10 here. What one thing would you most attribute to his struggles through the first 3 games?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about like the social media stuff. I don't think that plays into it at all, honestly.
Okay.
I think it's the fact that he's almost trying too hard to prove that he can fit into that new offense, that he can be the drop back passer, and then you can see it's like when he's rolling out on these kind of improvised plays, it's almost like you can see the gears like churning in his head a little bit. It just doesn't seem super natural or second nature to him yet. And so I think, but again, it's been less than a full game of total action. So I think it's just the fact that he hasn't had that many live reps in this new offense yet.
So give it time. Brandon?
Yeah, I'd agree with Dan. It's, I mean, for 18, 20 years, he was not a pocket passer. So it takes time to get out of that and become ingrained with that part of your, rather than being a scrambling quarterback, being a pocket guy, and then learning Jay Gruden's new system. So it's probably isn't the best analogy right now, considering what's going on with Tiger Woods, but you remember when he changed his swing
many
in between,
times.
yeah, and it was worse before it got better.
Right.
So everybody talked, and then he went on and won like 4 straight majors, 8 majors. So just give it time. I mean, he needs. I mean, he can't forever stay stagnant, and I'm talking about RG3. He can't stay how he is, but it's going to be worse before it gets better.
Well, there are other historical references that our colleague Neil Greenberg wrote about Drew Brees' first few years in the league. He's really struggled. So, I mean, it is early. I mean, we have to make that point. It's a good point. Scott, what about you?
Guys, if you spent a little less time tweeting and a little bit more time practicing the drop back. Jay Gruden yesterday talking about the confidence, how it's there in practice most days and it's just not translating to the games. And I think I watched all of the Cleveland game, caught part of the Ravens game, and you saw it on that pick that he threw to Joe Hayden, where it just looked out of sorts as the pocket started to close around him. And I think maybe part of that is psychological, coming off of the knee injury, where his first instinct, like you guys said, is to run away from that. Mm-hmm. He's been running away from hits throughout his entire career, making guys miss. And now to be told to stand in the pocket and wait that extra split second and trust that you see what you're seeing, I think that's just going to take time, and I trust that it'll come early in the season.
Can I say, though, I do think that the deep balls that he's been throwing have often been pretty on point. The one with Deshaun Jackson this week, I mean, he wound up out of bounds by half a step, but it was not a bad pass. He could have let him a little bit more, and obviously he could have kept it a little bit more in bounds. But he did connect with Andre Roberts on that deep ball.
In the Browns game, yeah.
And it doesn't take too many of those to change your stats pretty quickly to look.
That's true. And in the last 40 seconds that we have, quick answer here, guys. How important is the read option, or at least the threat of it, for his success this year? And maybe just early in the season, Scott, what do you think?
I still think it's really important. And I think he's just got to be smarter when he gets out there, whether it's the threat of either throwing it away if he doesn't see anything or picking up a few yards and getting out of bounds and not taking an extra hit.
It keeps the defense on their heels. Brandon, what do you think?
I mean, long term, this is smart to make him more of a pocket passer, but he's still young. He can still run. So having, like you said, that threat there, it's important.
Do you expect to see it, Dan?
I think one dangerous run by him a game can keep the defense on their heels a little bit, and I think it probably gives him a little bit of confidence too in his whole game. So I would use it extremely sparingly.
But that could be a scramble too, to your point, one dangerous run. But I think, I mean, it'd be interesting to see whether we see any of that in Houston. I mean, we've got some time to talk about that. All right, guys, let's go Kirk Cousins. And obviously he's had a much more successful preseason. But again, to what everybody, Brandon, you're shaking your head. Preseason heroes, it happens every year. We saw what Kirk Cousins did in the last 3 games of regular season last year. I tend to think that holds more weight than what he's done in the preseason. But put yourself in Bruce Allen's shoes here, Dan. And if the Rams come to you and say, offer a second-round pick for Kirk Cousins, do you say yes?
Absolutely. I absolutely do. And, I have to say, part of the reason is because I think it does create a distraction. And, I'm kind of low on the distraction talk in general, but this has been 3 years of this stuff. And when they first drafted Cousins, people sort of suggested that would be the case. And I thought that was kind of silly because RG3 seemed so obviously the future of the franchise. But this has been going on and on and on. And, Joe Theismann kind of walked back his comments a little bit today, but when you've got the official optimist on the team broadcast network saying this guy's played better than your starter, I think that it kind of wears on you, and I think that it just creates an unneeded question in that locker room. So I would get rid of, I think a second-round pick would be a great return, but I also think he would take that major distraction off the table. And frankly, if RG3 gets hurt or something like that, the worst-case scenario, you're probably going to struggle anyhow. So I don't think that should be that much of a concern.
I 100% agree with that. What do you think, Brandon?
Yeah, I would give it a little thought as far as the trade, but because the thing is, the reason that trade is possible is because the starter got hurt. So RG3, I wouldn't call him fragile like Sam Bradford, but he's gotten hurt before. So
sure.
You wonder, should you have that guy behind just in case? But like Dan said, it is a big distraction. And for every Steve Young who turned out good behind Joe Montana, there's the Matt Flynn's, Matt Schaub's, who else? The guys that look great in garbage time. Yeah.
Aaron Rodgers is on the other side.
But he was. That's a little different. I hear. But it just calm down, guys. It's just he's playing against the second team.
So you would make the trade too?
Yeah.
You make the trade for a second round pick. Scott, you too? Are we all in agreement here?
I think you guys make some good points, and I don't think I could fault Bruce Allen for doing that deal. I don't know that I would do it though.
Okay.
I think you got to ask yourself the drop from Kirk Cousins to Colt McCoy in the event that RG3 does go down. Is that something you're willing to live with for a season and go through another potentially 3-13 season before reaping the rewards of that number 2 pick the following year, and then probably not for another year after that, depending whether you use it on a QB. I imagine they wouldn't, because then you're creating a whole other distraction again.
Right. So you're saying, though, that you think that Cousins could kind of keep the team afloat and win some games, whereas you wouldn't expect that out of McCoy or another backup that they'd bring in.
Correct. And I think Cousins, every single time he's asked about it, he says, doggone it, I'm the backup QB. He's saying everything right. He's also said in the past that he wants to start. But in terms of being a distraction, I think that's on RG3 if he becomes a distraction. And obviously Joe T and everyone else talking about it. But from Cousins' standpoint, I think he's kind of accepted his role, and he's everything you could want in a backup right now. One of the better backups in the league, I'd say.
I do think it's a little unfair. And I would get rid of him, but I think it's a little unfair to judge him with the way those last 3 games went last year. Because that was a team that was 3-10, with a dead man walking coach. One of those games,
it was a circus.
The game of the Giants was just a total farce. And a quarterback's obviously not playing by himself out there, so I think it's a little bit harsh to judge him on those 3 games. Obviously, the year before he looked pretty good.
But you have to judge him on those 3 games higher than you judge him in these preseason games against second and third string defenses, right?
I feel like both are kind of
factors involved.
Oh, come on. You have to regular season play.
That was a tough situation to go into. So
all right.
And if you're going to judge him on these preseason games, you also have to acknowledge that he's playing with Ryan Grant as his top receiver or whatever. He's not got Deshaun Jackson and Pierre Garçon out there.
All right. If you guys are, let's look ahead to this last preseason game. The defense, we understand they've played pretty well in the preseason. The starters will not play. Should Jay Gruden play the starting offense, Dan, given how poorly they've looked in the first 3 games, or are you with him on sort of keeping him healthy?
Absolutely not. I can't believe that this has become a topic. First of all, what happens if you do that and they play badly again?
Right.
Then you've done something completely different than what every other NFL team does, and you've hurt if this confidence is the reason, you've hurt it even more. But the absolute worst case scenario is someone gets hurt, and then you're dealing with 7 days of noise, 10 days of noise about that. I just don't see the upside. The absolute best case scenario is you throw them out there for 1 or 2 series and they play really, really well against backups in a meaningless game. I just don't see how the upside justifies it.
I thought most teams play their first string for 1 series in the final game. That's like 1 tune-up. It's not everybody's starting second stringers, are they? I thought. No, am I on an island here?
Board, but for the most part,
I know there's some variants.
I think it's pretty standard now not to do that.
Okay.
Yeah,
Brandon,
there's nothing to gain.
Nothing to gain.
If you put them out there, you're just trying to prove something to the people that don't
matter. A guy who's got to learn a new offense in the pocket.
So they look great.
But what if the second series is bad? Then you put them out for a third series, and if the third series is bad.
But if they score a touchdown, then against the backups, then at least you shut up the people who are saying, "Oh, they haven't scored a touchdown."
Who cares what people say? If they get blown out against Houston, all this doesn't matter. Who are you trying to prove whatever to who do you want to stop talking? Like, you got to deal with the distractions.
But Gruden did say there was a 10% chance then.
Yeah.
What was that all about?
Just keeping things interesting for us. I guess something else to blog about. Some reason to watch 7:30 on Thursday. I mean, I don't know. Do extra 7-on-7s or something in Ashburn with RG3 wearing the red "Don't Hit Me" jersey or something. Don't put them out there. It just has disaster written all over.
You know what? Like health-wise. And like Jay Gruden said, his biggest concern coming out of the preseason is health. They've fared pretty well. Even the couple scares that they had in the last game, Arakpo and Morgan Moses, I guess Jordan Reed too, they all seem like they're going to be totally fine for week 1. They've had no serious issues. I don't see why you would roll the dice on that.
So you don't, and you guys expect you sort of are buying into the vanilla offense of the preseason. Don't worry too much. It doesn't matter. The results of preseason historically haven't mattered. So once we get to Houston, you expect the offense to look a lot better, is sort of what I'm hearing.
I think a lot different. I think definitely
if
it'll
you
look
have
a
a
lot
whole
different.
game to play, you would think, yeah.
You know what? I mean,
overtime.
Oh, I think the most interesting thing we're going to be talking about going into the Houston game is those Houston pass rushers and the Redskins offensive line. Because the offensive line has kind of been
and
under
that's
the
what we
radar
don't talk about.
RG3's
RG3 isn't perfect. But I mean, if you got guys coming at you all day,
yeah, that's true. That's absolutely a key part of the offensive struggle. Sure, I would say that. It's not all on RG3.
Yeah. And I think that's why Gruden yesterday and the day before saying, you know, our identity is going to be more of a running team. Yeah, we brought in Deshaun Jackson. We've got this great receiving core. But if you expect us to be flinging around 40 times a game, forget about it.
But are they going to be as good a running team if they can't? If RG3 continues to struggle like this? That'll be something to watch for. We'll see. We'll see. You guys are saying don't worry too early. It's preseason. I agree.
Focus on watching the backup running backs on Thursday. That'll be a big drama.
Right, or in the kicking game, right?
Yeah, or the kicking
All right,
game, right.
Let's get to the Nationals, guys. And they've won 12 of 14, the hottest team in baseball right now. If the playoffs started today, and we mentioned the Boz column, where he was talking about how Strasburg's kind of had an uneven season. He's 10-10 with a 3.59 ERA, which is the highest ERA of the 5 starters. Although he does lead the National League in strikeouts with over 200. Dan Steinberg, if the playoffs started today and it were up to you, you're Matt Williams, who is your Game 1 starter for the Nationals?
You know, I actually changed my mind on that this morning after reading Boz's column in which he argued against Steven Strasburg. Right? I think it's Strasburg.
He
said if I had to make the call right now.
He didn't name somebody,
but he said if I had to make the call right now, it wouldn't be.
Okay.
But I think I would go with Strasburg because, God, I'm like Mr. Distraction talk nowadays, but I just think Strasburg's obviously going to be in your postseason rotation, and if he's not the number 1, after he's been proclaimed the number 1 all year, I think there's just too many questions about what happened, what does he need to do, how could he ever reclaim that, just kind of nonsense questions. He's going to be pitching anyhow. He's got one of the best strikeout per 9 innings ratios in the majors, which I think matters a lot in the postseason. And you know, he had a couple of really dominant starts in a row before this last one. I just wouldn't overreact based on, you know, he's had some first inning troubles for sure. He's had some control issues, but I think that the reason that we're having this conversation right now is because of one bad start his last time out. And I just would stick with the plan and not try to add something else.
The one bad start's part of it, but Boz's pointed out that about a third of his starts have been really bad. And the 2/3 have been very good.
Yeah.
But 1/3, I mean, and do you roll the dice with a Game 1 starter with the importance of Game 1? Brandon, what are your thoughts?
I keep going back and forth about this because, I mean, I know I said before the show the game was not important, and it is in a sense
You
that.
don't have to say that now.
Yeah, I'll throw it out there. I'll throw it out there. We talked before the show. It is in a sense, but I'm more so concerned about the guy when it's Game 5, Game 7. Who am I going to put the ball in their hands and is going to perform? And on one hand, you could put Strasburg out there for Game 1, and then maybe that situation would be set up and he'd have the game to kind of get whatever jitters out of the way. Or I would say maybe go with a Zimmerman or a Pfister that's proven themselves consistently over time, especially Pfister, who's had that playoff experience. Like I think with the Tigers, he was in a Game 1 situation, looked terrible, and they came back and did good. So maybe that speaks to Dan's point.
So you say Pfister or Zimmerman,
honest,
maybe?
yeah.
What's your answer here? You're all over the place.
Like I said, I'm struggling, man. We'll say Zimmerman.
All right, Zimmerman.
Yeah.
Scott, what do you got?
Safe.
I'll go Doug Pfister then. You alluded to the the postseason experience that he had in Detroit. I think he's pitched 7 games. He won a Game 5 at New York. He probably has the lowest Ks per 9 of Nats starters, but he also has the fewest number of walks per 9 innings as well, which to me is more important in the postseason. He's a guy who's just been really consistent all year. He started a little bit later than some of the other guys. Jordan Zimmerman had that huge June. Tanner Roark had a huge July, but Pfister, he roughed up a little bit in his last start, but game to game, he's the guy I feel most confident about, and I think that postseason experience is invaluable.
That's my answer.
Don't change your answer. I would agree with you on
the
Zimmerman.
The playoff experience goes a long way.
But I think that to Dan's point, I think that there's like this underlying, what's the message that it sends to Strasburg if he's not the game one guy, and how does that materialize over the next few years or the playoff series or whatever? You just don't want to. I don't know if that's part of the equation or not, but that would be interesting to see.
I think in a best of 5, you can't make that.
You can't. All right. Well, it'll be interesting to see. And
don't forget with Zimmerman. To me, Zimmerman sort of is the natural choice, but don't forget he got absolutely rocked in his first playoff start 2 years ago.
Right. It'll be interesting. And Strasburg has no playoff experience, so is that a negative?
And maybe make Strasburg start game 2 if it's at home.
Lots, man. We've got 4 weeks left to talk about this thing. This is great.
Or you could just shut him down.
Much more. Let's not go there. All right, let's move on to college football, guys. The Terps are in the Big Ten inaugural season this year. Give me your best case scenario, Scott Allen, for the University of Maryland in its inaugural season in the Big this year.
All right, I think best case scenario is that for a change, everybody stays healthy, starting with C.J. Brown. I mean, they've got a great set of wide receivers.
They do.
Coming back from injury, obviously. And they've got a soft schedule, as a lot of teams in the Big Ten do, to open up. So I'd say the best case scenario, they open up 5-0 with that game.
5-0, wow.
I mean, Indiana, Syracuse, James Madison to start. Open up 5-0 with a sure loss coming up against Ohio State, and then maybe steal one against Penn State, who they've beaten
on
once,
the road to Happy Valley. You hear that,
ever.
LeVar? I'm sure you're watching. We're gonna go to Happy Valley. Sorry, go ahead.
135-1 all time against Penn State. So that would be a great, excellent case scenario for Maryland, and I think it's harder for them to improve on last year's. Or were they 7-6?
7-6 last year, right? They've improved all 3 years under Randy Edsall, so it's hard to see that continuing in their first season in the Big Ten.
Right. So I'm going to say 7-5 as best case.
7-5. That would be
after starting 5-0. That'd be
Brandon, what do you got?
I say best case 5-7 because like Scott said, their schedule is backloaded. You got once you start that Ohio State stretch, you got Iowa at Wisconsin at Penn State, Michigan State at Michigan. Yeah. There's no way they win any of those games. So it's gonna. I mean, I'm not trying to hate on them, but it's gonna be rough. And I know the big reason why they moved to the Big Ten was for football, and I guess you could bring in more money, but they're gonna pay on the field for it.
Yeah, at least the first couple of years, you'd think. Dan, what do you got?
Yeah, you would think at most they're gonna be favored in probably 2 of their league games.
Big Ten
at most.
Indiana and Rutgers.
Yeah, I guess.
I think that's about it.
And I think it's possible that they would be favored in none. I mean, I think it's possible based on how the season goes that they would be underdogs at Indiana, and if they're not playing well, underdogs home against Rutgers. I would say 6-6 seems like a good best case scenario to me. I mean, it's just hard to envision them winning more than 2 or 3 games in the league. But
Big Ten Network's Tom Dienhart has Maryland as a sleeper pick to finish 4th ahead of Penn State, Indiana, and Rutgers.
What do you have as the best case?
I actually think 5-7, 6-6 is about right. I don't think that there's much. I mean, but if they stay healthy, they do have weapons. So it'll be interesting to see. We'll
backloaded.
All right. Oh, well, some of us will be there on Saturday. We'll see how they open up against the Dukes. All right. Well, thanks for joining us on Post Sports Live. For Dan Steinberg, Brandon Parker, Scott Allen, I'm Jonathan Forsythe. See you next Tuesday right here, where we'll be previewing the Redskins Game 1 opponents, the Houston Texans.
Games that count.
All right. Games that matter.
Yes.
See you guys.